All right, it's our final segment this morning. Thanks for joining us. Our guest, attorney Abby Rubenfeld. It's good to have her on as we're still talking what is natural marriage. Not so much just that question alone, but also discussing legislation, Tennessee Natural Marriage Defense Act, being considered, sponsored in part by Representative Mark Pody, senator from Lebanon. We'll be, actually not representative, he's Senator Mark Pody from Lebanon. And we'll have him on the program here in the coming days to go into more detail with why he'd like to see this pass. You're obviously an opponent of it. You argued against this in the past before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court sided with constitutional rights. Same-sex marriage is legal in Tennessee.
Yes, sir. It's legal all over the country, and as I said before,
right.
I believe in the rule of law, and we went by the rules. We litigated this for 2 years. The Supreme Court ruled, and that's the law in the country now.
So that's the law, and passing something like this seems like wouldn't do anything, but I don't know.
Well, it would create more litigation and more costs for Tennessee.
Yeah, right. All right. Let's go to Raymond. Good morning, Raymond.
Yeah, good morning.
Hi, Ray. Go ahead.
I got it. Yeah, I think that if they would quit calling it marriage in the eyes of God, if they would drop that out of it and give them the benefits that they want, I think all they want is the same benefits that married people have. And if they would drop that out of using the Lord and the connection between them and give them the same benefits, call it something else besides marriage in the eyes of God, the Christian people would quit opposing it and allow them to have their marriage. It's the morals that the Christian people oppose in the eyes of the Christian people, because God says it's a sin for a man to marry man and women to marry women.
All right, it's interesting. I mean, and I think I know where you're going to go with this, but I mean, I think he's right to some degree.
Oh, I agree with him.
Yeah.
I said that before. I think one of the solutions could have been, I mean, an impractical solution. This would not work, but, you know, in theory, as I said before, give marriage back to churches and the state just gives everybody civil unions. The problem is that whatever the state, whatever the government gives to people, and it's the government that gives marriage licenses, not a marriage certificate from a church, a marriage license is from the government. So the government has to be fair. Under the Equal Protection Clause, they can't treat different groups differently unless there's a valid reason. And there's no valid reason except for the religious beliefs that this man's talking about, which I agree with. And religiously, the Supreme Court ruling in Obergefell doesn't affect their religious rights. Their church can still say no.
Sure. Okay, and that was an interesting call. That, you know, I guess thought in that way, and his thought is correct. But yeah, the reason it won't work is because they have to treat everyone the same, and beyond just the ability to get some of the benefits that come with being married. I know it also is a symbolic thing to say that we all have the same ability to do the same thing.
Exactly, and the United States Supreme Court in 1954 said that separate but equal doesn't really work, and that was in the context of race in the schools. But the concept that separate but equal doesn't work is the same. It carries over. If there's two different categories, like why? And the reason is religion, so that makes it improper in terms of the state. Gotcha.
All right, let's go to Carla. Carla, good morning. Hi, Carla.
Good morning.
Morning. What's on your mind?
Oh, well, you know, I'm a single woman, and I prefer men, but I think that every single person has the right to be the way they want to be. You know, nobody out there has all the rules on what's good and what's bad, and whatever makes you happy should be okay. And that's my opinion.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I mean, listen, yeah, it's interesting this morning because I know we have viewers on this program, many of whom are conservative. We've had a few of them obviously just call, but that feel strongly about same-sex marriage and object to it. But they're not calling in. But I'm wondering if part of that is, look, they're not going to change their objection, but maybe, you know, the understanding is that the law is the way it is. Here's the thing, whether that law is on the books or not, you're still going to have your partner, aren't you? It's not going to, some of these people, it's a sin and they just wish it would go away. Well, whether you're allowed to get married or not is not going to make it go away for them.
Exactly.
It's just not. That's the other thing that just, the sheer logic of it, it just seems like it's a visceral, and I understand the strongly held religious beliefs, just visceral, well, that's just wrong, shouldn't happen, can't happen, you know? And it's like, well, think beyond that.
Right, and in this country, part of our constitutional system, a constitutional democracy, is that majority rules, but it's subject to the Constitution. If the majority adopts a law or a rule that's going to discriminate and violate the Constitution, then the majority doesn't win on that. It has to be, laws have to be consistent with the United States Constitution.
All right, so I was looking at some of this. They're saying, at least on this bill right now as it stands, I think we have the right one now in terms of where it goes. There's some confusion sometimes, but it says it's in the Senate, referred to the Judiciary Committee, in the House, assigned to Children and Families Subcommittee, and they say there's no fiscal note at this point filed. So if it's not filed, that doesn't mean there isn't a fiscal. And what that means is that's what everyone looks for first off the bat a lot of times. What's this bill going to cost us? What's it going to cost? It hasn't been filed at this point.
Right, but the exact same bill was determined to cost $9 billion the last time they introduced it, and I suspect it would cost more now, given inflation and all.
That's probably why a fiscal note's not assigned right now.
I
mean, that on its face alone, no matter, I mean, and you're wondering, well, how's it going to cost $9 billion? Again, we touched on that. It's federal dollars.
Right, we lose federal dollars.
If you violate federal law, that kind of disqualifies you from getting aid for things like TennCare and you know, children's services and along those lines. I mean, there's so much at stake here for something that seems to be, and again, we'll ask Senator Pody about this, something that's more or less, I think, symbolic maybe, or religious based, and has no chance of winning. Do you suspect this is just going to be around, or what's it going to take for it to become more mainstream? We had a caller earlier about there was a time, you know, blacks and whites couldn't marry.
Exactly.
You know, and now it's commonplace, as it should be. You know, you can marry whoever you want, but that's been accepted. And you think back to a time when that was there, and you think, gosh, how could we have been that way? Do you think that's the way people will look back years from now?
I think it's already changed.
Okay, has
I mean,
it?
But
you still have bills like this coming up.
Right, but public opinion polls show that the support for same-sex marriage goes up and up and up, or support for, you know, not violating the Constitution goes up and up. So I think public opinion is changing, and it will continue to change as, you know, people get used to the idea that it's not, and plus they're going to see the sky's not going to fall in. Like, God's not going to strike down Tennessee because we have these marriages. In Massachusetts, they've had them since like 1994, and the state's still functioning just fine.
Yeah, but we are getting a lot of rain, these floodwaters.
That's true. That's true. Very good point.
It's just weird. Okay, let's go to Martha. Martha, last call. Good morning, Martha.
Yes.
Hi, Martha. Go ahead, ma'am.
Am I on the air?
Yes, you are. What's on your mind?
Oh, well, it didn't take long to get through.
Well, we thought we'd bring you up.
Well, what I want to comment on, y'all talking about the gay movement, and where does God come in all of this? Because he's gonna have his way in the end, and it's wrong.
Well, we were just
in the New Testament.
We were just kind of talking about this. I mean, are you religious?
I'm Jewish, so
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm somewhat religious.
And again, here's a woman. You know, where does God come into it? And I guess, as you've said on time and again, her religious belief and faith and what her church does, the God plays a big role, and it should, and no one should tell her what her church or she does.
And the Obergefell decision, the case that went to the Supreme Court that said that there has to be marriage equality. Everyone has to be treated the same, whether they're same-sex or opposite-sex in marriage. It's not based on religion. It's based on federal law. And yes, I mean, religions, God can do whatever he or she wants, and people have their beliefs. But while we're here on earth, and we live in the United States, we have a rule of law, we have a constitutional system, and we abide by the Constitution. That's what makes our country great.
Yeah. So I would say, as you said, while you're here on earth, Martha has her deeply held beliefs, and if it's something she believes is a sin, then certainly she's not going to practice it, and
she can pray for people. If she believes it's a sin, she can pray for them, she can do all of that. She has the absolute right to do it.
And then if she chooses to believe that God's going to hold folks accountable in the afterlife, then so be it.
And we take that risk.
And yeah, well, we all take risks, and we all sin, that's for sure. But not that that's a sin. I'm just saying you take your risks in life, and that's how it goes about. And so, but yeah, I'm glad she called in, because there are a lot of people that, well, where does God come into this?
But it's important to note that people who are gay can also be Christian and be just as devoutly Christian as that caller was, can have very deeply held religion. You know, it's debatable whether I'm not a religious scholar, but religious scholars debate what the Bible actually says about this issue, and there are different interpretations. So in churches and synagogues and mosques should keep debating that, but we have to keep the distinction between church and state.
Abby, thank you for coming on.
Sure,
it's a pleasure having you on, talking about this and laying that out, and I appreciate all the phone calls. And as I said, we'll have Senator Pody on.
That sounds good.
And he'll have a program to himself where he can talk about his belief and why he wants to see this legislation move forward. We'll follow it through and we'll see how it goes this session. Thanks again for coming on.
Sure,
I appreciate it so much. Be back with the programming note right after this. Stay with us.